Discover this grandma's incredible journey. A heartwarming tale of transformation and resilience. The sun hung low, casting an eerie glow over the small town of Maplewood. A pensioner named Edna had everyone whispering whenever she walked past. You see, Edna didn't fit the typical grandma mold. With her wild silver hair, mismatched socks, and an appetite for adventure that put the bravest of souls to shame, she was one of a kind. But it wasn't just her unpredictable fashion sense that turned heads. Oh no! Rumors swirled like leaves in the wind. People claimed her house was filled with strange artifacts, shimmering crystals, books that whispered when you opened them, and most astonishing of all, a dusty old trunk that supposedly held the key to another dimension. Was it true? Every Saturday, she'd shuffle down to the local market, carrying a colorful tote that looked like it had seen better days. Kids would call her Wacky Edna, and she'd laugh, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Behind those twinkling eyes lay a story that tugged at hearts and sparked curiosity. It was said she once trained a troop of raccoons to play cards just to win bets against the old men at the park. But underneath that playful exterior, Edna held secrets darker than the basement of her creaky old house. It was the strange disappearances, pets that wandered too far, people who ventured into the woods after dusk, no trace of them ever returned. The townsfolk exchanged nervous glances when talking about the cursed forest, just off Edna's property, where the shadows cast by towering trees seemed to stretch and sway like they had a life of their own. Was it merely a figment of imagination? Or was Edna's quiet home a gateway to something far scarier? As the sun began to dip, the air thickened with tension. Those who dared to speak to Edna claimed they felt a strange pull when she told tales of amazing realms and mystical creatures. It was intoxicating yet terrifying, as if the very essence of her words cast a spell on those listening. Whispers floated around the market. She knows something we don't. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Just as the last light faded, an unusual storm rolled in. Thundering clouds gathered over Edna's property, casting the town into a shadowy melancholy. Just then a piercing scream ripped through the air, sending chills down spines. It was coming from the direction of her house. The townsfolk rushed in a clump, hearts hammering, fueled by both fear and curiosity. What atrocity awaited them inside Edna's door? What cursed mystery lay in wait? Would they dare to uncover the truth of the enigmatic grandma? Only one thing was certain: their lives would never be the same again. The crowd huddled together, edged closer by the bone-chilling scream still echoing in their ears. Gasps and murmurs filled the air, creating a cacophony of fear. Anxious faces turned to one another, wide eyes darting as they wondered who would be brave enough to go first. Someone should check on her. A voice finally cut through the noise: a young man named Mike, who once played on Edna's front lawn as a child. He stepped forward, trembling but resolute. Maybe it's just the storm, someone else suggested, though their voice wavered. Thunder grumbled in response, low and menacing. Enough with the what-ifs, shouted a woman named Karen, her usual bossy self flaring up despite the tension. We can't leave her alone if she's in trouble. With a cautious breath, the small group began moving toward Edna's creaky front door, which stood ajar, flapping weakly in the gusts of wind. An otherworldly chill slithered out, chilling their bones and igniting a deep-seated sense of dread. Mike reached the door. It creaked open wider at his touch, revealing a flickering candlelight that cast dancing shadows across the walls. The entire room seemed to breathe. "Edna?" he called out, his voice breaking slightly. Silence hung thick, wrapping around them like a heavy blanket. Suddenly the whispers began, soft at first, rising like the wind outside. "Help me please," a voice floated from within, quaking with fear. They exchanged looks, the gravity of the moment anchoring them to the spot. "We can't just stand here," Karen urged, pushing forward, driven more by her instinct to lead than by her sense of safety. They stepped inside, the soft glow revealing the mesmerizing chaos of Edna's home. Shelves piled high with odd trinkets, peculiar plants casting shadows, and books stacked haphazardly on every conceivable surface. Yet, amid the peculiarities something felt off. The soft but insistent whimper was drawing them deeper. As they moved in, a sudden crash of thunder shook the house, and something shifted beyond the walls, an intense rustling, as if something ancient was stirring. "Edna!" Mike called again, his courage dissolving into anxiety. Rounding a corner, they entered a dimly lit room where the air thickened, a source of shimmering light illuminating the edges. The dusty trunk lay at the center of it all, aglow as if alive. The very air around it shimmered with a different kind of energy, a mix of fear and wonder. But then, beneath the stark glow, they saw her. Edna was kneeling next to the trunk, grasping a shimmering object in her hands. Her wild silver hair, usually humorously tousled, was now taut and in disarray, a clear indication of the distress she was in. "Get back!" she screamed suddenly, her voice rising in panic. The townsfolk recoiled. Fear gripped their hearts as Edna struggled against something invisible, her knuckles white as she held onto the glowing object. "It's coming, you don't understand." Chaos ensued. The winds outside roared louder, a tempest raging as the shadows in the corners of the room grew longer and deeper. Courage clashed with terror, and the group hesitated. Would they protect this woman who had spent her life weaving magic and wonder? Or would they crumble to the lurking darkness surrounding them? Just as a small glint of hope sparked in their hearts, the atmosphere shifted once more. Edna's eyes widened and she gasped, "You have to choose now." The group froze. What choice was there? What could they possibly do? In that moment, the world outside shrunk, leaving behind one harrowing question. Could they trust Edna? Or were they destined to join the vanished? Outside, the storm threatened to unleash its wrath, and their hearts raced as darkness boiled and churned, calling them forward into the unknown. The room pulsed with an agonizing energy, almost as if the walls themselves were alive, holding tight to the air thick with fear. Mike's heart raced. He felt a burning desire to rush forward, to pull Edna away from whatever darkness was creeping into their lives. But her frantic eyes held him back, drawing him into the swirling chaos. "They're coming," Edna gasped, her voice a squeak between trembling breaths. "You must make a choice. The light or the darkness." Mike's mind raced. A choice? What choice? How could they choose when they didn't even understand what was happening? Around him, the others were frozen. Fear anchored their feet to the creaking floorboards. "Someone say something." Karen's fierce voice broke the silence, but it only heightened the tension. Her eyes darted towards Edna, then back at the trunk. Something sinister stirred among them, a darkness that seemed to crawl closer, hungry for their dread. Suddenly, a piercing shriek ripped through the air, silencing them all. It didn't come from Edna. It echoed from within the trunk. The light brightened, casting long shadows as figures began to claw at the edges of the glow. "What is that?" whispered Janice, her voice thin, barely holding together as panic pulsed in her veins. She stepped back involuntarily, her breath quickening. "It's not just the storm," Mike murmured, a realization dawning on him like a distant thunder. "It's something more, something she unleashed." "Edna, what did you do?" he demanded, the tremor in his voice betraying his fear. I found it," she cried, clutching the shimmering object tighter. "I thought it could help us. We need it, please, you have to believe me." The trunk's wails intensified, mingling with the storm outside, each cry morphing into a twisted chorus of despair. The intensity was overwhelming, clawing at their insides and sending chills racing down their spines. "No, it's too late," Mike yelled. "Whatever is inside is trying to break free. We have to shut it," Karen shouted back, the urgency triggering her protective instinct. "Should we not help Edna? What if we're part of this? What if we're meant to do something here?" The storm held in agreement, pulling the shadows tighter. With each pulse of the trunk, the energy felt thicker, as if their very souls were being weighed against the choice before them. "We have to close it," Mike shouted, and with that he lunged for the trunk. But Edna was quicker, determination rushing through her limbs. "Stop. It will consume you," she cried, desperation etched in her voice. But the others moved, clinging to Mike as if he were their lifeline. "We have to act. If we keep hesitating, we could lose everything." In the chaos, Edna's panicked face morphed into a mask of calm. You must trust me. The choice is not just for us, it's for the world. What do you mean? A voice trembled within the whispers of the currents flowing in before Edna could answer. The trunk burst open with a violent crack. Shimmering tendrils of light poured forth, wrapping around Edna, pulling her closer. She gasped as a blinding light enveloped her, and for a moment her voice cut through the storm fire. You must choose. The light or the darkness. In that heart-stopping instant, time felt suspended. It was no longer just about Edna or the town, but about everything they stood for. Would they embrace the light she offered or succumb to the darkness that had been stirred? And just like that, a chilling wind swept through the room, forcing them into a storm of choices, a tempest that left only two roads untraveled: hope or despair. As they looked to each other, hearts racing, the words slipped from their lips in desperate unison. What do we want? Outside, the storm howled louder, and the reality of their situation pressed down like a weight. Whatever they decided would change everything. But were they brave enough to see it through? Their gazes met in silent communication, heavy with fear and yet electric with an undeniable bond. United by uncertainty, they had only one option left. Together? Someone dared to ask, voice quivering with a hint of hope. As they steeled themselves, the next echoing thunder rumbled ominously and the room trembled once more. The moment the thunder shook the room, a sharp crack of lightning illuminated the trunk's chaotic hues. For a second Mike felt suspended, as if the very fabric of reality had torn. Edna's expression morphed between fear and resolve, but it was the duality of despair and hope that left him reeling. Mike, we can't just stand here. Karen's voice broke through the fog of indecision. Panic had clawed its way back into her demeanor. With wide eyes she looked at the trunk, where wailing shadows began spilling forth, stretching like hands reaching for their souls. Shut it, please. Janice pleaded, back pressed against the wall, her breath hitching as the eerie light flickered. Every heartbeat in the room drummed loudly, a shared fear of the unknown intertwining them. But the whispers from the trunk had morphed into a haunting melody, wrapping around Edna. You need to let go. They echoed, seductive yet sinister. I can't. Not yet. Edna shouted, her conviction suddenly stronger. This light, it's connecting us. We can turn it into something beautiful. Beautiful? Mike cringed, feeling irritation swell within him. Look at what's happening. This isn't helping anyone. We've got to make a choice. Suddenly the shadows pulsed, and one elongated finger of darkness shot out, barely missing Mike's face. They recoiled instinctively. Whatever you choose, it won't be easy, the shadows hissed, taunting them. You'll pay a price. Why does it always come down to a price? Karen's heart raced, her palms slick with sweat. We didn't ask for this. We just wanted to help Edna. As Mike edged closer to the trunk, he felt the tempting glow reach out to touch him, tingling against his skin like warmth from a fire. What if it can help us? He muttered, barely aware he'd spoken out loud. He was torn, lured into a stance that grasped at his deepest desires: power, protection, and safety. But at what cost? Remember, Mike. Edna shouted, eyes blazing. Influence doesn't come from darkness. It's all about embracing the light. We can't give in to fear. Then let us act. He countered, feeling a rush of strength surge through him. But with each tense moment, the air thickened, wrapping them tighter in its heavy embrace. The shadows danced closer, laughter echoing like nails scratching against glass. What will you sacrifice? They taunted. A collective shout from the group rang out. We can't let it win. And then without thinking, they all reached for the trunk together, hands grabbing at Edna's shimmering object, their former doubts replaced with an unspoken bond. The trunk shuddered against their grasp, as if it were resisting their unity. Leave us. The shadows screeched, angry now. They lunged, encircling Edna, clutching her as if she were their prized possession. No, Mike roared, tears pricking at the corners of his eyes. We won't lose you to this thing. In that moment, a blinding brilliance erupted from Edna. The shadows recoiled, howling as tendrils of light shot forth, illuminating the room, pushing against the inky darkness. Let there be light, she cried, her voice carried on wings of hope, echoed by others as they found their courage. Suddenly, with a crack so loud it shattered the air, the light exploded outward, enveloping them in its warm embrace. But just as suddenly, a new chilling shadow formed, darker and more potent, creeping in like venom. "This is not over," it whispered, a remnant of force clinging to the edges of their reality. As the light dimmed and the room regained its shape, a cold dread settled in Mike's chest. They had only just begun to fight. What did we awaken? He thought, struggling to understand the weight of their actions as the storm's howling intensified again. Outside, the wind screamed more fiercely now, as if in retaliation. The price they would pay had yet to reveal itself. And then, breaking through the tension, a flicker of movement caught Mike's eye, shadows coalescing into new forms. Were they friends or foes? His heart sank as he whispered to no one, "What happens now?" Something ominous loomed ahead, and deep within his gut, he sensed they had stepped from one deadly storm into another. The shadows spiraled and twisted, growing more defined with each pulse of energy. Mike squinted against the fading light, every instinct screaming at him to run. Fear clawed at his throat, tightening until he could hardly breathe. He watched as the darkness twisted into vague shapes, the silhouettes of lost souls, or perhaps horrific figures made to torment them. "Stay together," he shouted, his voice trembling with urgency. But in that moment doubt crept in. What if they took the wrong step? What if the shadows lashed out again and separated them for good? "Look," Karen cried, pointing toward the far side of the room. "There's something moving there." The wall seemed to ripple, shadows spilling out like smoke. They formed a massive, looming figure that loomed ominously, a specter shrouded in darkness, wearing a crown of flickering flames at its head. "What do you want?" Edna's voice cracked, echoing uncertainty, but her determination was evident. The figure hovered, its presence heavy with dread. "To remind you of your past, your regrets," it snarled, the voice low and chilling, grinding against their ears. "You think you can escape me? I am every pain you've tried to bury." A wave of memories washed over them, each haunting image sweeping through like a thunderstorm. Mike gasped. He saw his father's disappointed glare. The day he lost his job, the friend he betrayed. Those moments clawed at him, the weight of guilt slamming into him with every breath. "You have nothing but weakness." The figure spat, venom dripping from each word. "You can't fight me. You can't fight your own shadows." "No." Edna stepped forward, fierce and unyielding. "We are not defined by our pasts. We choose who we become." With that, she grasped the shimmering object in the trunk, glowing with a fierce light that contrasted against the encroaching darkness. The figure wavered, its form flickering as if caught in a violent wind, but it quickly reformed, growing larger. "Foolish girl," it roared, extending horrific arms that seemed more like black tendrils. "You're all just a moment away from despair. Embrace what you are." In a flash, shadows darted toward Mike, plunging into him like icy daggers. He staggered, clutching his heart, and his eyes widened with horror. Whispers filled his mind, feeding on his fears, each teasing and whispering promises of power if he would only let go of what? Of fear? Of friendship? Of Edna? His hands shook violently, his inner turmoil warring against the warmth of the light around Edna. "I want tea," he shouted, pushing back against the dark whispers that clawed and tugged at his sanity. "I will fight." The roar of thunder shook the room once more, and he felt the very foundation tremble beneath him. The shadows pulled harder and Janice stumbled, lost in her own memories of regret and pain. "Fight it, Janice," Karen urged, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We're in this together. Remember what we stand for." The words hung in the air, a light through the fog. Slowly, Janice's eyes cleared as she focused on the growing light from Edna's object. That glimmer reached her, wrapping around her like a warm hug. "Let us push back," Mike shouted, determination igniting within him. "Edna, together. All of us." As they reached out, hands intertwined, a surge of energy shot from Edna's object. It pulsed brightly, a beacon against the shadowy figure. The air crackled with intensity, lighting up the room with a glow that momentarily staved off the shadows, but it wasn't enough. The figure screeched, its form shifting and ebbing like waves crashing against a shore. "You will pay for this defiance," it hissed, growing larger, as if feeding off their fear. With blood pounding in his ears, Mike realized they had only begun to challenge the darkness. He squeezed Edna's hand tighter, absorbing her strength and hope. "We can't back down, we have to stand strong." But outside, the storm raged even fiercer, drowning them in the cacophony of despair. The shadows, though struggling, seemed to merge a swirling mass of terror promising to swallow their light whole. Is that what we're becoming? He pondered, panic gripping him again. What would it take to extinguish the darkness for good? The answer hung painfully in the air, just out of reach, and then with a sudden lurch the shadows recoiled, whispering new secrets as if preparing for their next move. Mike instinctively stepped back, caught between the impending doom closing in around them. What now? He thought, a cold dread creeping up his spine. Each heartbeat echoed the weight of their next choice, gripping him with a fear that threatened to swallow him whole. The question lingered, heavy and haunting, as the storm brewed thicker, an ominous force just beyond the threshold of their reality. The figure let out a deafening shriek, shaking the room down to its very core. Shadows twisted tighter around them, swirling like a tempest. Mike felt the press of darkness, an oppressive weight that pushed against his chest, squeezing every breath he took. Keep focused, Edna called out, her voice ringing with urgency. The light. We need to channel it. The terrifying specter loomed closer, its gaping maw revealing a darkness so deep it felt consuming. It bared its jagged teeth, and for a moment, Mike could see the glimmers of their own fears reflected back at them: guilt, betrayal, and disappointment. Each glance ignited new waves of torment, forcing Mike to confront the worst parts of himself. No. He slammed his eyes shut, shaking his head as if he could physically dislodge the memories. Gritting his teeth, he focused on Edna and the light emanating from her hand. Together, he urged, feeling a flicker of hope ignite within. The shadows trembled slightly, as if sensing their defiance. Yet the figure leered, feeding off their hesitation. You are nothing without me, without your past, it taunted. No one escapes their history. Maybe not, Janice shouted, her voice rising against the cacophony of despair. But we can rise above it. Our past doesn't define our future. The shadows recoiled as if struck, and for a brief moment, a crack of light broke through the oppressive fog. Mike saw the others nod in agreement, strength coursing through their connection. He tightened his grip on Edna's hand, feeling the warmth of her resolve. Suddenly they all raised their hands toward the specter, channeling their combined energy into a blinding beam of light. It was no longer just Edna's object. It was collectively theirs, a symbol of unity and resilience against their fears. Let it go, Mike, Karen yelled, her eyes fierce with determination. Let it all go. We have to fight together. In the moments that followed, the light surged, stretching and bending around the creeping shadows like a shield. With a roar that sounded like 1,000 voices crying out, they pushed back against the figure. The air crackled with energy, shimmering like heat waves amidst the storm's fury. What is this? The figure screeched, retreating as the light encroached. You think you can banish me? Yes, Mike shouted, feeling his heart race as the weight of their combined strength flooded the air. Together we are stronger. As if in response, the shadows answered with a visceral tremor, swirling and writhing like trapped beasts. Yet the light held firm, brightly illuminating their faces, overpowering the darkness inch by inch. But just as victory felt within reach, the specter unleashed a torrent of shadow tendrils that lashed out in a desperate final attempt to reclaim its dominance. One of the shadows snaked toward Mike, wrapping around his ankle with an icy grip. Panic surged through him, and he fought against the choking darkness, but the tendril pulled harder, dragging him backward. Mike! Edna screamed, her fear piercing through the chaos. In a flash of instinct, he remembered all the moments that had brought him to this point, the sacrifices, the friendships, and the battles fought. Drawing from that power, he steeled himself and shouted, I will not be your prisoner any longer. With a final surge of will, he broke free of the grip. But in doing so, it sent waves through the group, and Mike saw Edna falter just for a moment. Edna! He cried, eyes wide with horror as the tendrils lunged toward her. Looking for an opening, the shadows were relentless, and as Janice, Karen, and Edna braced themselves for the onslaught, Mike felt a desperate urgency. We can't lose now. And in that moment he vowed to protect those who mattered most. The battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. What would it cost them to defeat this darkness once and for all? Would the light be strong enough to pierce through the suffocating shadows? The answer hung precariously in the air. A fragile thread stretched to its breaking point. The shadows roared in fury, twisting and clawing at the light as if it were a living thing. Mike's pulse beat in time with the chaos, a frantic thrum echoing in his ears. He met Edna's eyes, filled with both terror and a fierce determination. They had come too far to falter now. "Keep pushing," he shouted, his voice cutting through the terror. "We can't let it win." But the specter was relentless. Its form, a swirling mass of darkness, lunged forward, tendrils snapping like whips. One grasping tendril struck Janice, wrapping around her wrist, pulling her into the depths of despair. She gasped, her voice choking as it tried to claw her away. "Janice!" Mike's heart sank. The moment hung like a pendulum, threatening to drop into darkness. Without thinking, he dashed toward her, fueled by raw instinct. "Mike, no!" Edna screamed, but he could not turn back. The light surged behind him, infused with the collective strength of his friends, a beacon of hope they could not abandon. He reached Janice just as the shadows began to whip around her, threatening to consume her. "Hold on!" he yelled, grasping her other wrist and channeling every ounce of light he could muster. Janice clenched her teeth against the pain, her eyes bright with fear. "I can't hold on much longer." The air around them crackled, the light stretching and bending. Mike could feel the darkness tugging at his own sanity, the weight of hidden fears threatening to engulf him. But he couldn't give in. Memories flooded his mind, their laughter, their shared struggles, every moment that had brought them together. "Remember who we are," Mike shouted, his voice laced with urgency. "We're more than our past. We're a team." With a jolt, the darkness hesitated. Behind him he could feel Edna and Karen rallying. They matched their light to his, pulling at the tendrils while fueling their strength. The pulsating glow wrapped around Janice, shimmering like golden chains of hope. "Together!" Edna roared, and in that moment, it felt as if the world stopped. The shadows recoiled, darkness swirling desperately to escape the light. The specter's roar echoed through the room, a horrifying wail of fury mixed with fear, blending into a symphony of anguish. But just as they began to push forward, a shape shot out from the shadows, a grotesque figure formed from their memories of pain. It surged at Mike, and reality splintered around him. He felt each sorrow from his past clawing at him. Betrayal, regret, isolation. Each wave hit him like 1,000 knives. "Fight it!" Karen yelled, her voice shaky but firm. "You control your own heart. Focus!" Edna echoed, her hand reaching for Mike even as she struggled against the dark. With every ounce of strength, he gritted his teeth and fought back against the memories, refusing to let them win. In that seething moment he realized something: the fears they fought weren't just from the past. They were also the shadows of their present. The weight of their choices hovered around them like a storm cloud, threatening to pull them down into despair. Mike inhaled sharply, focusing on their bond. "Remember the good," he shouted, his voice breaking through the chaos. "We are more than this." With renewed strength, each of them strengthened the beam of light even further, weaving it tighter around the shadows. The dark form writhed in agony, unable to bear the brightness. But just as it seemed victory was near, the specter lashed out again, striking at the tender points of their hearts with wicked ease. "You think this trinket can save you?" it wheezed, a sickly grin stretching across its elongated face. "You will always be tainted by your choices." Suddenly Mike felt the shadows begin to pull at his heart, dragging him down. It felt as if chains were wrapping around him, each link forged from guilt and insecurities. "No!" he shouted, a fierce light igniting within him. "We are stronger than you think. We will break every chain." As if responding to that fierce declaration, a surge of light erupted from their clasped hands, breaking through the darkness. The shadows screamed in a cacophony of defeat. But just then, an enormous tendril reached for Edna, twisting away from the light. Mike's heart sank again, knowing if they lost her now, all would be lost. "Edna!" he screamed as time slowed, stretched like an elastic band ready to snap. Would they have enough power to save her before she was engulfed? Or would their unity shatter under the specter's dark grasp? The tension danced in the air, the looming uncertainty clawing at their resolve. Mike's throat tightened as he watched Edna struggle against the tendril. The darkness was a sinuous serpent, coiling around her like a vice. He could see the fear in her eyes, a reflection of his own, mirroring the terror that gripped them all. "Edna!" The scream tore from his lips, raw and desperate. In that moment the world narrowed to just her. He felt the bond they built over the years surge inside of him, This was not just about them. It was about everything they fought for. The love shared and the laughter echoing through their lives. Let her go, he bellowed, desperation fueling his determination. With a sudden fierce resolve, Mike ripped his focus back to Janice, the light still aglow around them. He felt her urgency as she gripped his hand tighter. We can do this. Together. Karen chimed in, her voice a battle cry that crackled through the dark air, pushing against the weight of despair. Mike concentrated, feeling the shimmering energy flicker like a flame trying to stay alive in the storm. He squeezed Janice's hand tighter and drew from every ounce of hope within him. On three. We're stronger than the darkness. 1, 2, 3. In an explosion of light, their bond pulsed outwards. The comforting warmth surged through the air, engulfing Edna's tendril with searing intensity. The specter writhed violently, its form distorting, as if it could feel the threat of their united resolve. T howled in agony, a sound that seemed to seep into every darkened corner of the room. The very walls pulsated with the vibrations of their strength. You think you can defeat me? It spat with venom. I am the darkness of every choice you regret. You cannot escape. Suddenly Mike felt something inside him twist and turn. A familiar guilt, creeping in like a shadow at dusk. The regret for every moment he felt he had let his friends down. Memories flooded him again, times when he had held back. Moments he had rejected love out of fear. No. He roared, the power of his conviction forcing back the suffocating thoughts. You are not me. You don't own my past. His light flared even brighter, sending shockwaves rippling through the room. Edna, still trapped but fighting, caught his eye with a glimmer of hope. Don't stop, Mike. We need you. The raw connection between them felt like a lifeline, igniting an unstoppable force. It wrapped around Edna, buoying her against the shadow's grasp. Mike could feel every fiber of his being align with their shared determination, the bond they forged through love, laughter, and all that was good in their lives. With one last push, they pulled together, illuminating the darkness until it shimmered like a dying star. The shadow shrieked, and with a violent convulsion, it recoiled, tendrils snapping back like rubber bands. One last stranglehold around Edna's wrist loosened and shattered. Got her! Janice shouted, her voice filled with triumphant relief. Edna stumbled forward, breathless but alive, the tendril dissipating into nothingness. But the victory was short-lived. The specter, writhing with fury and despair, began to coalesce again, more furious than before. You think this is over? It hissed, its voice dripping with malevolence. You have only awakened your darkest fears. Cold dread gripped Mike's heart anew. The shadows were regrowing, twisting in ways they hadn't seen before. A new, even darker presence began to emerge at the edges of force beyond their imagination. Stay together, Edna shouted, rallying them once more. We can't let it divide us. Just as Mike and his friends found their footing again, a sudden silence enveloped them, heavy and pressing. The air thickened, charged with a darkness that felt sentient, alive and breathing, and then the ground trembled beneath them, cracks splintering through the floor. As they looked down in horror, their eyes widened at the realization that the very foundation of their hope was beginning to fracture. Would the strength of their bond be enough, or were they merely delaying the inevitable? The shadows laughed, mocking their spirit, and Mike swallowed hard. Time was running out, and a far more sinister chapter was about to unfold. The tremors intensified, the room shaking like a leaf caught in a storm. Mike's heart pounded harder with each reverberation, a drum echoing the fear clawing at his chest. The darkness writhed, rearing back as though it was alive, feeding off their panic, and the laughter transformed into a cacophony of voices, each one taunting, each one a reminder of their weakness. Get back! Mike shouted, taking a step forward, his instincts screaming to protect his friends. He felt Janice's grip tighten around his hand, and the warmth of her resolve surged through him. It was a reminder of what was at stake. He could feel Edna's pulse as she steadied herself, slowly standing beside him. We'll face this together, she said, her voice shaky but firm. No one falls behind. As if responding to their unity, the darkness throbbed and rippled, the shadows pulling tighter, hungry for despair. A chilling voice boomed around them. You think you can fight me? This is your essence, your doubt. Mike squeezed his eyes shut for a moment. Memories flooded him again, faces of friends not present, times he was too scared to reach out, Moments he let fear dictate his actions instead of love. But there it was, the flicker of a flame, his heart racing with need and determination. The light hasn't gone out. It just needed to be rekindled. Trust in each other, he yelled, snapping his eyes open. Trust in the light we share. In a desperate attempt to channel everything they had, he focused on Janice and Karen, the light flowing through their hands and merging into one brilliant glow. With every ounce of resolve, they began to create a barrier against the shadow creeping closer, its shape shifting and mingling with their fears. It seemed alive, a manifestation of their worst moments. The ground cracked loudly, sending splinters of despair into the air. You are all so weak, the shadow hissed, curling towards them. I'll feast on your regrets. I'll consume your light. The darkness surged forward, tendrils lunging toward Karen, but as they did, a flash of brilliance erupted from the trio, an explosion of light that connected their hearts in a profound way. It was raw, primal, a display of their shared history and unwavering love. The tendrils faltered, recoiling in confusion, and for a brief moment, Mike saw fear in its swirling form. Now, Edna cried out, her voice piercing through the chaos. Push it back. They unleashed a torrent of light forged from every beautiful moment they had lived, the laughter, the tears, the struggles turned victories. The air crackled with energy, vibrating the very essence of their bond. With one united cry, we are more than our darkness. They thrust the beam toward the shadow. The room lit up like a star being born, a shock wave expanding as the darkness screamed, its form fluttering erratically. The chain of shadows they once feared began to splinter, fracturing like glass under pressure. But just as it seemed to falter, a new wave of shadows erupted from deep below, hungry and relentless. Tendrils reached higher and higher, clawing their way up. Mike felt a new presence, an insidious, malevolent force rising, one that drained warmth and hope. The ground shook violently, threatening to consume them all as the air thickened with despair, but then a brilliant flash pierced through the gloom. Both stunning and horrific, a figure shimmered in the depths of the darkness, a silhouette of broken memories. Mike's eyes widened as the distant features began to solidify into a face he recognized too well. Mom? He breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. Would the light sustain him against the shadows of old? Or was this new revelation just the beginning of something even darker lurking on the horizon? The shadows swirled, shifting around Mike, swirling like a storm ready to pounce. He felt the world compress around him, an almost suffocating pressure built from both the weight of memory and the surging darkness. The figure before him took shape, and his breath hitched in his throat. Mom? It was as if every regret he held on to manifested before his eyes, the feeling so potent that it clenched his heart tight. The warmth he had felt moments ago was eclipsed by cold despair. You think you can outshine your past? You are nothing without it, the apparition sneered, merging with the other shadows, each whispering tales of neglect and hurt. Fight it, Mike, Karen yelled, her voice slicing through the thick air like a lifeline. She's not your past. She's just an illusion. Edna stepped alongside him, grounding him with her presence, eyes fierce against the swirling chaos. Remember who you are, she urged, her hand reaching out. We are the light, not our shadows. Mike blinked slowly, drawing on the warmth of his memories, the laughter, the shared times. The golden glow from Edna's object flared brighter, illuminating the darkness, and a burst of clarity. He called out, Mom, I forgive you. The words poured from his heart, burning away the roots of guilt that clung to him like vines. I will not let this darkness swallow me. The specter recoiled, twisting away, revealing it was not only feeding on his past, but also the fears that held everyone else captive as well. Janice and Karen squeezed his hands tighter. We're with you, they shouted, courage punctuating each word as if they were in sync. The four of them focused on the light, letting it swirl between their clasped hands. Together, they echoed in unison, pouring everything they had into the beam of light that shot toward the darkness. The air shimmered, the walls creaking under the pressure of their resolve. As the golden energy surged forward, the shadows surged back, their screams a mix of fury and despair. The darkness twisted, seeming to solidify into a monstrous mass, but the light held it at bay, illuminating the room, piercing through the fog of fear. Remember the joy. Remember the love. Edna shouted, rallying them. Mike summoned images of laughter shared, meals around the table, stories told under the stars. each memory intertwined with their current strength, illuminating the room in waves of warmth. Suddenly, with a keening wail, the shadowy tendrils lashed out again, striking at them with cold, clawing force. "You cannot win," the specter howled, but the power of friendship rang clear, driving the shadows back toward the trunk. "Push it back," Karen shouted from the depths of her resolve, her voice echoing through the melee. "This is our moment." With a combined shout they thrust their light afresh, the warmth pouring forward, tearing through the darkness. The spectral figure twisted and writhed, shrieking in agony as the glow enveloped it, illuminating the depths of its twisted form. With a final surge, a beam stretched toward the core of darkness, a cascade of brilliance erupting across the room. The shadows writhed in torment, screaming as if light itself was the worst kind of punishment. The brilliant force pushed every inch of despair back into the trunk, forcing the last bits of their past into a brilliant eruption that shattered the shadows, and then silence fell. Mike gasped for breath as he swayed, the aftershocks of adrenaline still racing through him. The trunk lay closed, the glimmer of light still emanating softly, steady and warm. Edna, Karen and Janice stood close, breathing heavily, uncertainty still looming. "Did we do it?" Janice whispered, her eyes scanning the room, waiting for something to strike. "I think we did," Mike said, letting a shaky relief wash over him. The weight that had clung to their chests for so long began to lift, like a summer fog courting the dawn. They had faced their fears, their pasts, and by standing together, they had chosen hope above all. The shadows were gone now, and with them the weight of secrets. The room slowly settled into a quiet peace. Edna brushed at her hair, smiling through her exhaustion. "We did this together. You all believed," she said, beaming, but the storm had calmed, revealing the first glimmers of a hopeful dawn outside. The air felt fresh, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings. For the townsfolk, the wild stories surrounding Edna had transformed into whispers of power and unity, an embrace of what it really meant to support one another. As they left Edna's home, stepping into the vibrant morning light, Mike realized how luminous his life could be, how even the shadows had their place in shaping him. They walked together, hearts lighter, knowing they can face whatever came next united. "Let us make the most of our light," Mike said, glancing back at Edna, who wore a proud smile, surrounded by her newfound family of friends. Together, they ventured into a world full of possibilities, ready to conquer anything. And as he walked hand in hand with Karen and Janice, Mike felt a sense of closure, a promise to carry the lessons learned deep into their futures. If you love this incredible journey with Edna and her friends, you need to subscribe immediately to our channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help others discover this tale. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about what happens next. I want to hear from you. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Supporting this channel is vital, and only true fans understand how much it means.